Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Plenty to get to. I've got a few election-related things, a number of election-related things, actually, a few education-related things as well, and some excellent news on the jab front, including some possible cures, and certainly some remedies, I should say, that have been brought up in the past by Dr. Brian Ardis, and stay tuned for that, because I'll get to that a little bit later, because I've been using some of them. Of course, I'm not jabbed, but I have been shed on with a lingering cough for quite some time and a little bit of dizziness, but thanks to Brian Ardis, and again, I should have even relied on my own past articles that I've written about the subject, but I've never actually given it a try, and it has to do with using nicotine gum. And believe it or not, it works, and it works very quickly. So I'll get to that a little bit later. But first, let me give you some of my observations here on voting early. I voted on Friday in Butler County, Ohio, in the, again, General Tax Building where we do our voting. I've been voting here in this building on most voting days, I should say, and certainly early voting, for, I would say, 10 years, because I've been living here for just over 10 years now, having moved back from Florida, and I can tell you that as soon as I pulled up, of course you see all of the signs in the grass and everything else around the parking lots, but right out of the gate immediately they had a sheriff's deputy at an intersection just down the street from this building where we all vote. Again, it's usually for early voting, or of course the people who live in that general area can vote there, but if it weren't early voting and I was actually voting on election day, then I would have to vote at one of the local schools. Either way, as soon as you hit this intersection, there's a sheriff's deputy, and he's directing traffic. It's a three-way stop, essentially, and again, he's in the middle directing traffic, and I've never seen that before, not in 10 years. And then, of course, you look in all three directions, or certainly in both directions, and the line of cars is just immense. And then the line of cars coming out of the voting place was also a very long line. As I'm pulling up to the voting place and the actual parking lot, which is surrounded by a grass field, and there are other parking lots, I want to say approximately 3 of them around this building, sort of in an L shape, all of the spots were taken and people were parking in the grass. Again, I've never seen this. I even put this post on greatawakening.win, and I put the same exact post on Gab kind of describing this, but I've never seen that before. There were just so many cars there and a number of people. Again, I pull in. I ended up parking in the grass sort of by the exit road so I could kind of get out relatively quickly. Everybody enters through one door, and then everybody leaves through the same door. So they don't let you enter and leave. Well, you can enter, I should say. You can enter through the same door, but anyway, that's probably inconsequential. Either way, when I walked in, there was a visible line waiting outside of the room where you go in and you vote. And there were already more poll workers on the outside of this room than I had ever seen. And they were adjusting the line separators and sort of the line dividers depending on the size of the line. Again, the vast majority of the people there were middle-aged to elderly. I was probably one of the younger individuals there, but either way, as I was walking through the line, of course, to ultimately enter the room where you actually vote, they had a giant television screen there. Again, I've never seen this before, but it was just filled with directions on what to do. When you see the purple light at the stand, make sure that you walk up to that particular person, you hand them your driver's license, you tell them your name, blah, 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 all of that stuff. They've never had that before. It's a good idea, of course, to have all of that to prompt people as to what to do. And then they have another television screen once you enter the room. And again, it's telling you the exact same stuff. What to say, hand them your driver's license, go to this particular, unit to get basically checked in and the whole thing. But once you do all of that, of course, and you look into the room, you can immediately, again, see far more poll workers than ever before. And at the exact same time, there were people walking around monitoring, making sure that things were working and whatever else. Again, they're Dominion machines, so who's to really tell? But there were more Dominion machines there than I had ever seen before also. They had multiple rows. I mean, they were moving people in and out like clockwork. I mean, it was a well-oiled machine. So I have to hand it to them. Again, given how packed it was, it still moved quick. I was probably in and out in less than 15 minutes tops. So, again, you vote, you hand them your card, the whole thing. Yes, I voted for Trump. I voted red ticket all the way down. I didn't vote for Richard Jones, the local sheriff, because he was running unopposed and I don't like him. Same thing with the county prosecutor. He always runs unopposed. I don't like him. You know my take on that. I've been over it on the show before. There's a biological weapon masquerading as a preventative medicine for something that doesn't exist, and nobody seems to be learning about any of this, even when you present them information. So these people are useless. But either way, once I was done voting, again, handed them everything, and I'm looking around, I'm trying to gauge again who might be a Kamala voter or a Trump voter or whatever. Again, Butler County, Ohio is a red county, by and large, typically has been. The university itself, Miami University, and all of their branch campuses are the largest employer in the county, from what I understand, except, of course, the vast majority of the employees within these universities are, in fact, conservative. Because it's the non-teaching staff that probably make up the vast majority of the employees. So when you're talking about engineers, ground and maintenance, you name it, all of those non-teaching and non-administrative staff, these people are typically conservative, by and large. So again, this is one of the major reasons why Butler County, Ohio is typically a red county. With that said, again, as I was leaving, there were clearly a couple of Kamala voters walking in because they were the only ones putting their masks on. Their masks looked really disgusting. It looked like they had been, I don't know, keeping their masks inside of their pants for weeks on end. They really looked disgusting. And, I was leaving and I, of course, saw them and almost threw up in my mouth. And then I, again, made my way back to my car and drove away. And then, of course, you're waiting in line, in a line of cars, in order to get through that intersection that I immediately entered. Point being, on a Friday afternoon at approximately 1:30 to 2 p.m. in the afternoon, at the end of the first week of early voting, it was packed to the gills. Again, I've never seen it like that in 10 years. So again, is Donald Trump going to win Ohio? You bet your ass he is. There's no doubt about it. It doesn't matter, again, if Donald Trump were to take, Kamala Harris rather, were to take Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Toledo. It won't matter. None of that will matter. The fact is that Ohio is a red state, usually always has been, certainly voter fraud in the past, but there's no denying it now. So with all of that said, again, I would encourage individuals to pay attention to what goes on in their polling stations. If you can vote early, I would encourage people to do that too, although, again, who's to say? I'm saying that, of course, because of possible election day, not only fraud, but election day chaos and or election day shenanigans and or an election delay. So let me get into some of these posts here. These are from GreatAwakening.win, a lot of different people's opinions as to what might take place, what might go on. Not to mention, Donald Trump even let it slip. He even talked about how Kamala Harris might be leaving and there might be a third candidate. Now, again, I don't know if he's talking about Tim Walz leaving or Kamala Harris, but I did hear him drop that dime. I thought that was kind of interesting. Again, as a little foreshadowing as to what's taking place, not sure. But of course, things aren't going well for Tim Walz. Either way, let me mention this here very quickly. There was this particular post, again, having to do with possible election day. It said the following, quote, "My inquiring mind wants to know." They said, here we go, quote, "So, as many of you know, I'm on board the, quote, there will be no election boat." So that's the boat that they're on board with. It says, "And I have been for a long time because that's what all of the Q drops point to, in my opinion. I think I'm correct on that, but my overview has suddenly changed. After President Trump implored us to vote early and make it too big to rig, the dovetailing of the Q drops and Trump's innuendos are too much to ignore. The election will be shut down on Election Day. It'll be shut down by the white hats to prevent the steal. There will be no midnight drops, of mysterious ballots because it'll be offline. All your vote are belong to us," they said. That makes no sense, not grammatically correct. Anyway, they said following Trump's advice, he will be so far in the lead at shutdown, they won't be able to steal it with their theft mechanism inoperable. Think about this. 10 days darkness, shutdown. Please save the darkness argument. Going off memory post 88 clearly says darkness. And then they continued and said, and the tweet of all tweets, as they try to steal it through delays, motions to vacate, motions to default to a runoff election, and all kinds of shenanigans that are clearly illegal. It all makes sense viewed through that prism. It shines a light on Trump's dominant win, the way that they will scurry around trying to prevent his win, the riots that will ensue, and the military quashing it. And the tweet, where, again, it's been stated that he'll state on X that the storm is upon us, things of that nature. So there was that individual's take. There was also this take, and by the way, this is something that I've done for a number of years also, given the fact that we vote on Dominion voting machines, is that on the right-hand side, they print out basically what looks like a grocery receipt in the lower right-hand corner. So when you cast your ballot, or you at least, it'll say print your ballot, you hit that button and then it starts to print each particular page and it shows all of your choices. As that's happening and as I'm voting, I already have my phone out and I have the camera option open. And what I'm doing is I'm taking pictures of the receipt as it's printing them out so I have them for my own record. Again, who's to know, it may not matter, but either way, I just like doing that. The very last receipt they show, of course, has a QR code. When that QR code popped up on the camera app on my phone, of course, a website pops up, and then you click on it, and it didn't actually take me to any website to verify my vote. Now, I assume this is logical, because I just voted, and that would be probably a little too fast, certainly at that moment in time. That QR code, again, is probably for future reference, not that very specific day. Either way, make sure and take a picture of that QR code if you actually vote electronically like that. And if you don't, and you vote by an actual paper ballot, I would suggest taking multiple pictures of your actual paper ballot before you shove it through the machine. With all of that said, here's what this individual said. They said, voter tip for all states still using Dominion voting machines. They said, early voting begins in Georgia next week, and several states have already started. States that are still using Dominion machines produce a printed paper copy that one then takes over to the ballot drop machine as they exit the polling station. Yeah, we don't do that, but either way. It says, but did you know that the machine that you insert your printed paper ballot into only reads the QR code at the bottom of the page? So even though it may say Trump Vance at the bottom of the page, the QR code could say something different. I urge everyone to insert a ballot with a QR code, to use the camera reader on your phone to check that the QR code matches your vote before you leave the polling station. And then they said, edit, instructions, open the camera app on your phone and aim it at the QR code, but don't take a pic. The lens of the camera is a QR reader. It'll hone in on the code and open up the details in another page that allows you to see what is embedded in the code. If you've never used your camera app to read a QR code, I urge you to practice a few times on a trusted QR code. Many restaurants use QR code camera readers, methods for using their menu during COVID, and that's all they said. Again, I tried that with the receipt QR code on the lower right-hand side of the Dominion machine, again, when you can see your actual paper receipt being printed out behind a little plastic door there, or a plastic window. It doesn't actually take you to a website. In fact, it says it's inoperable, something like that, or no information could be found, I think was the exact quote. Either way, you still want to take picture evidence of what it is that you've actually voted. I think that's certainly important for a variety of reasons, but either way, again, definitely take pictures of who you actually voted for on the actual receipt itself, or your actual full paper ballot if you vote by paper ballot. And then, of course, a QR code, if one does exist, on either, again, one of those giant form paper ballots that people fill out where they bubble it in with a pen, or, again, you're voting on a Dominion machine. So, yeah, just a few tips there. Okay, now there's this regarding Tim Walz. You may recall that back in August, I brought up a 4chan post that had to do with a foreign exchange student, or certainly a minor at the time, now an adult, accusing Tim Walz of basically sexually grooming him, groping him inappropriately, and potentially having sex with other children, again in these foreign exchange student trips that he would take. This is coming out more and more within the last few days. And Red Pill 78 had this individual on his show via voice video, describing exactly, again, Tim Walz's behavior and a number of other things. I want to play just a little bit of that right here, right now. But it also, of course, brings into question what would happen if all of this came to the forefront, even though we know that the media, by and large, would do their best to hide this. But either way, what would this mean, again, regarding a vice presidential candidate dropping out before actual election day, even though votes have already been cast? And essentially, again, what does that mean legally? I have a few posts regarding that also that might answer that question. Long story short on that, it basically doesn't matter. He can drop out, he can stay in, they can even replace him after Election Day. Again, certainly in December when the Electoral College ends up voting and they can basically select whoever the hell they want. Essentially, there's so much, I find this fascinating. There's just so much chaos going on regarding this and so many options and so many angles that just even thinking about a piece of this is highly entertaining to me. So let me play the audio first of this individual describing a few of his experiences with Tim Walz back in the day, and then I'll get into some of these posts, regarding, again, what might happen if he were to drop out and then what that might mean for the future. So give this a listen here from Red Pill 78 in 3, 2, 1.
You're not left alone with your host family while you're in America, because this organization, you're supposed to do a lot of volunteering work with other exchange students in the city. And this is how I met friends. Basically, first of all, with other exchange students, because we had the same feelings and the same problems, I would say. And we will talk about it a little bit later.
I definitely want to circle back to that. Okay, so how, and just for the record, we're talking about the school that you came to attend is the school that Tim Walz was a teacher at, Coach Walz. How did you come to meet Tim Walz, and what can you tell us about that interaction?
Well, so he was not my actual teacher. We had this thing. I had like several classes, I think 3 of them. And after the third lesson, we had some kind of a open class hour. So we wouldn't have a lesson, but we had some time inside of a classroom, and we had some time to complete the homework, or we could go to any other teachers and ask questions. So he was the teacher sometimes who was there during that class hour, who would be there just to be with a group of students. So this is how I met him. And the first experience and interactions, they were actually pretty positive, because he seemed that he was really curious about foreign culture. And well, everybody would know that I'm an exchange student. And for some reason, maybe not for some reason, but older people, like teachers, they were more interested in these exchange students. And maybe I had a problem making friends with other students, but I definitely had no problems communicating with the teachers. And especially with Tim, because he was pretty friendly at first, asking about the culture, about just general countries in West, etc. So,
all right. And when did the relationship with Tim Walz become unsettling or uncomfortable for you?
Well, I had a story. I had a lesson. Just it was at the beginning of the school day, and it was PE, and we had lockers to keep all of the things together. And after I got back, I realized that some of my things, personal belongings, were missing, and I was really upset about that, because well, somebody steals from you some personal stuff, and you're an exchange student, and you don't know what to do. You're just upset. I went to my PE teacher and told him about the story, but he didn't seem to care about it a lot. He said, "Look, like there is nothing we can do about it. Sorry." And I was extremely upset, and I went to the next class right before the class hour, and I spent the next lesson just lying on my desk, almost crying. And I went to class hour later, hoping that some of the people I know would support me or do something, and Tim was there. And when I came in, he could see that I was pretty upset while I was almost crying. And like, he could definitely tell that something happened. And because of that, after this open class hour started, he invited me to the next, like, near classroom, which was empty, just to talk about it. And I told him the story, and he seemed to be very supportive. And, he would, like, I'm not sure how this is called in English, but he would touch my shoulder, like, just like the sign of support. And he would do the same with my back while I was telling the story. And then he would touch some other parts. I'm not sure, like, the correct word I would say. He touched my butt for several times, doing that just to show the support, which I considered to be weird, but I was too upset. And I thought, well, maybe he's just like, I don't know. You never think about it. Today's story, it's all about little pieces of the picture that comes together later. But when something like that happens, you don't even think that person wanted to do something bad. That was weird at the moment, but I had some other things to think about. And he did that after I completed my story. He said that he would do his best to help. He would talk to other teachers, and then he would hug me again and touch me there again. So that was the first experience of weird behavior from his side.
And I can totally understand how in the moment you would be emotional. And, there is a certain level of understanding, that somebody might comfort you, put their hand on your shoulder or something like that. But to begin touching you and certainly touching your back down to your butt, that's totally inappropriate. But the first thing that's inappropriate is that he would separate you, that he would take you into a room all on your own, almost like he's isolating you, preparing to groom you. That's just my outsider's perspective. That's sure what it seems like. So after that happened, Rick, did you tell anyone about this interaction? I mean, was it still something that you kind of just wrote it off, or did you let anybody know how that went down?
So by that time, I had told the story about some things were missing, and he did that weird thing. I would say we were in a pretty good relationship, and he wouldn't do anything weird before that. So I was thinking, I was at that point, I didn't think about that too much. Because, for example, right now, it is weird that he separated me from the other students. It is weird that he touched me. But from my point of view back then, I'm almost crying, and I'm afraid to talk in front of the other students. He takes me away, and I think, wow, he is a good man. He tries to support me, and he does something. He says he will help, and all I'm thinking about is, wow, he's a great teacher. He's a great man because he wants to help. So I wouldn't have thought about talking about it. And by that time, by that story, we would communicate for a pretty while, normal ways. We would just talk sometimes, and we would talk about cultures, about everything. And that was pretty all right. So that is why, because the picture before of our communication was good. And after that, it began to change drastically.
Tell us exactly how it began to change. I mean, was it just the physical touching, or would Coach Walz begin to bring up perhaps inappropriate subjects?
Sometimes we would talk a lot. And of course, when you start to talk for the first days, it's just about general stuff like culture, countries, schools, people, families, etc. But sometimes we would even go outside after school. I mean, it was not like everyday thing because I was a student. I was finishing earlier than the teachers. Sometimes he had the days when he would leave the school a little earlier, and we would just walk around the school area and talk. And sometimes he started to talk about more personal things, which were very weird. And he would talk about conservative people in my home country. We would talk about everything because he made me think that, look, nobody around you, he made me believe this thing. No one cares about you, but you can tell me everything. We can talk about everything. So, and we did talk about everything. We would talk about gay communities even. And I told him that in my home country, it's not like that. Because if you're gay in Kazakhstan and people know about it, your life would be destroyed. And he would talk about America, saying that the things are a little bit different. And it's a little well, there is a story connected to this topic, but it happened later. So we would talk about it a lot, about my crushes, about my communication with parents, about he would tell me like your secrets, you can trust me, and I will tell you my secrets, we can trust each other. So this was this type of communication.
So what you're describing seems like classic grooming behavior, isolating a student, separating them from anybody else in their life, making them feel like the adult is the only person that they can trust, that they can talk to, and then gradually moving the conversation into something wholly inappropriate. Do you remember why why the concept of homosexuality came up? I mean, anybody watching may remember that Tim Walz was a quote ally for the LGBTQ community, and he had run a club or something. I believe it was in 1999. He was the first faculty advisor to the student LGBT club, and he's used that on the campaign trail. I think it's also worth mentioning that Tim Walz signed into law a bill which would support gender-affirming care for children. It made it illegal or impossible for parents who disagreed on the transition of a child to fight the other. The child just gets to transition, and you can't go to court, you can't get custody. And when he signed that bill, he was holding the hand of a 12-year-old boy that was transitioning into a girl. So why did the concept of homosexuality come up? Did Tim Walz perhaps ask you if you were gay? Did he maybe suggest that you might be? Did he want to know about gay things with you? Tell us exactly.
So, when we started talking about it, that was nothing very weird about it because, like, we started talking about just some casual things. Then we talked about families and countries, etc. And it seemed to be normal to talk about, like, let's say, gay people in America. Like, we slightly went to that topic, very slightly. So I would never tell that was like, very, like, one day I meet him and he says, yo, you're like that. Are you like that? No, it was very slightly going into that direction. So, and that way back then I didn't feel that anything was wrong. We were just discussing gay people and lesbian people, and like sometimes we talked about like my personal experience with like communicating privately, let's say, with girls. And later, that was almost the end of the story. But like I will jump to another part of the story. When we started talking about that, he was talking about it more than he was supposed to, like more than he was supposed to, in my opinion. And we had an argument after he was telling me that I had like a feminine side in me, even though he knew I had a crush on the girl. And this is the time when an argument happened. So, like, that was after that story about our argument. We will come back, I think, to it a little bit later. We had a very bad argument, and I started avoiding him. But he definitely took his time to move from normal topics to this type of topics, making it seem normal, making it seem okay to talk about.
All right. So, and I'm sure that at this point in your life as an adult, you would recognize that there really isn't an appropriate time for a stranger or a teacher to talk about sex with a child. I mean, that just seems wildly inappropriate. As a father myself, I mean, like that's a conversation, that's not for anybody else outside of the family. Certainly, I would never talk to the child of a friend of mine and ask, hey, are you getting lucky, or any girls, doing things with you?
Sorry for the interruption. Imagine this. You are an exchange student from another country. You don't really have an opportunity to talk to your family. You have a host family. That was an okay, good host family, but we wouldn't be very close to each other, so we could discuss everything. So you are alone. You are without your family. You are without the friends. You find it difficult to find friends. And you meet a person who seems to be interested in your personality. And he would not only be friendly in talks and chats, he would bring some treats like chocolate that was not common in my home country. He was sharing something interesting. I tried to share something I had that you didn't have in America, from Kazakhstan. So, from the point of view of a teenager, you see, wow, this is so cool. I have found a grown-up person, and we can talk and share thoughts. We can do something together. And actually, that makes your exchange year go way better when you have someone around who seems to be caring about you. So, well, when you're grown up and you hear the story, it seems very strange. It's weird from the beginning. But when you are a child, when you're a teenager from another country, and you are in stress, each month you have a homesick because this cultural shock is too strong. Everything is different. People are different. Food is different. Schools are different. So it seemed to be like, wow, he's cool. I want to spend some time with him.
I'm going to stop it there, and I'll link it in the description below if you're interested into listening to the entire thing. Here's what I want to say about this. First of all, let me hone in on just what everybody has observed regarding numerous video clips and audio clips and what have you of both Tim Walz and his wife. There isn't an authentic bone in either of their bodies. Both of them are about as disconnected from reality as you could possibly imagine. Like most frauds and like most liars and blackmailed individuals and anybody with something to hide, they again seem inauthentic at every turn. It doesn't matter what they're doing. They could be tying their shoes and it would look like the most unnatural thing. Me personally, I think that visualizing such things and visualizing such behavior and a lack of authenticity is a gift from God, to be honest. It's a way, again, of God explaining to us that these are not good people, that there is something behind these people and something within these people that makes them not good people. Again, whether it's their inability to answer a question, their inability to admit fault, whatever it may be. These are people who are degenerates who clearly have something to hide. With that aside for a minute, although you can keep it as fresh as you'd like in your mind, I suppose, this kind of behavior is behavior that I worked with as a school teacher. I saw that kind of behavior year in and year out with people that I worked with. In fact, it was the reason I was a whistleblower. I was blowing the whistle on behavior just like what you heard there described. Same kinds of things. Slight touching, conversations, private conversations involving candy, trying to be viewed as being nice by very young students. In particular, in the cases where I witnessed, they were female students. And then there was another behavior which I saw very early on from one individual who ended up getting fired as a result, or he ended up resigning while in the middle of being investigated, was that this particular science teacher that worked in the building with us, who was friends with another sexual groomer in the building, who was also a union representative for the building, who I blew the whistle on later on. This particular science teacher, again, an older man, allegedly married, he ended up kissing a female student, and the female student was not interested in him. And the moment that there was rejection in that exchange, the rage that apparently came out of this guy was next level rage. And that right there is indicative of a sexual groomer also. They're not just getting mad that they were rejected. The rage is amplified because now it's instantly kicked into a separate gear, which is that they're going to get caught. So it's rage of rejection, but it's also rage of, why would you reject me? Because now that you've rejected me, I don't trust you to stay quiet as my victim. So now you're going to basically put my job and or freedom in jeopardy if I were to be arrested. Now here's the other thing. As the science teacher that I was working with, again, I didn't work with him, he just happened to be in the same building. We were on opposite ends of the building, as a matter of fact. But when this particular individual was doing what he was doing, and all of this had concluded, at no point was he ever arrested. See, therein lies the issue. But to tie in the last episode when I was going through the summaries of the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which I'm going to reference throughout this episode because there are numerous examples where this, of course, is turning out to be the case, and it's been the case for quite some time, is that discretion on the part of law enforcement and school environments is used when it comes to these kinds of people. If an adult kisses a minor, that individual should be arrested. The parents of said minor should have that person arrested. It's sexual assault. It's sexual battery. It's whatever you want to call it. It's against the law. It's a minor. In this particular case, it was a middle school student. So again, when I hear anybody talk about the kinds of behaviors having to do with sexual grooming, I've written about this in almost all of my books. I've written about this on Substack. These kinds of behaviors are exactly what exist within these environments. There's no doubt about it. Again, it starts off with befriending the individual, in particular when they're vulnerable, and then, again, you want to spend more time with them, and then private time with them, and then coerce them, again, using particular tools or toys or candy or gimmicks or whatever, again, in order to get them to like you more as a groomer. And then, one thing leads to another, and then it ends up being horrible. And then, unfortunately, also, in the minds of minors, they even interpret this as being sexual advances that they're actually interested in. And this too is why numerous teachers and students get busted for actually having sexual relationships with one another. So again, I don't think there's a statute of limitations when it comes to sexual assault. But again, this is indicative of Tim Walz's kind of behavior, and certainly his lack of authenticity, not to mention, of course, all of the sexual perversions that he's allowed throughout the schools of Minnesota and the laws that he's signed into place, and of course his nickname being Tampon Tim, with tampon machines inside of boys' bathrooms. Ladies and gentlemen, this is sexual grooming. That's all this is. The whole alphabet soup thing in school and out of school, in society, is sexual grooming, which means superintendents, school board members, school teachers, teachers' aides, whomever, building administrators, whoever it is that's advancing all of this, they are sexually grooming Americans and American minors. Period. Any of them who support it, that's what they're supporting. Now, you've heard me also say, and certainly write about in Substack, that the end game of that entire LGBT grooming thing is death. That's the end goal. That's the last stop. The last stop is death, whether that be through the drug addiction of the minor or the confusion, of course, that comes about as a result of the minor being groomed, or the sexual promiscuity that can come later in life as a result of being groomed, or whatever it may be. All of that is done at the hands of the adults who allow it in the first place and perpetuate those agendas in the first place. And as we know, based on things that I've brought up about local school districts, certainly here in Ohio and in the town where I live, these kinds of people justify their behavior by saying, well, you're bullying us, and you're bullying children who identify as the alphabet soup bullshit, and all of that. That's their justification for continuing to do it, is that they're saying that everybody else is victimizing them, and that's not allowed. Well, only a child groomer would say such a thing. Only a child abuser would say such a thing. Only someone, again, grooming minors in order to, again, manipulate them in that perverse direction would use something like, well, you're bullying them and that's why you don't like them, or all the name calling that, of course, occurs, you're homophobic, or you're this, that, or the other. No, we're against sexual grooming of children, and the LGBTQ alphabet soup bullshit agenda is all of that wrapped in a certain kind of wrapping paper designed to hide the real intent. But we know what the real intent is. If this continues again to be described regarding Tim Walz, he's in deep trouble. He's in very deep trouble. And again, I don't know the statute of limitations on such behavior, but it sounds like both this individual and or others, if there are others, Tim Walz and certainly those that he affiliates with need to be held accountable. There's no doubt about it. They should be arrested, tried, if guilty, convicted, and that's the way that it should be. But again, I mean, it's mind-numbing. The number of sexual groomers that exist within school environments is over-flippin'-whelming. And the vast majority are never caught. The vast majority are never arrested nor prosecuted, as even I've brought up here on the show regarding, a former middle school business teacher. No one prosecuted this guy. I mean, the prosecutor that I did not vote for, who was on the ballot, his office and him specifically did not prosecute this guy for groping a female student and having a history of doing so. This teacher was allowed to resign. He's no longer certified in the state of Ohio to teach. He'll probably never teach again, certainly not with certification in the United States. But he's free to go. He's on the streets doing God knows what to God knows who. Penicillin, ladies and gentlemen. We all know what the cure for pedophiles is. It's penicillin, and it's remarkably cheap, and it only takes one dose. But either way, it's beyond disgusting. But these people have to be held accountable. So let me get back to Great Awakening regarding Walz specifically and what happens if he were to drop out. Here's a particular post that said, what happens if Walz drops out of the race but early voting has started? They said, suppose Harris then replaces him with Clinton or whomever. What would happen to the votes already cast for Harris/Walz? Would they automatically go to Harris/Clinton? Or would those ballots be considered essentially wasted? Maybe it's different state by state. Does anyone know? And then there are a number of posts here. And there's just a few responses that I want to read because I think there were at least 33 here. Interesting number, but either way. The first one said, well, it's not the first one, but this is the most logical. It says, yes, very close. Seems all the comments about the Electoral College, which are correct, but seem to have gotten the fewest votes here. It says, nobody votes for Harris-Walz on November 4th. They vote for their state electors. It says, if Democrat electors are judged as winning the state, those electors go to the state capitol in mid-December and choose the electoral votes for president and VP separately. It says, whatever instruction prevails in December will be what they do. If it's useful and credible in December to vote essentially for whomever, is basically what they're saying, the electors will. It says electors are free to reject the party line whether or not they pledged to on the honor system or with penalties. If the Republican electors get 270 on November 5th, it won't matter because their block will hold. It says if they don't, then the Democrat electors will theoretically make it to 270 without mutiny, but many other scenarios could arise. And then they said, see faithless elector on Wikipedia for fun stories. There's another post down here at the bottom, which I took a screenshot of, and I just want to read this. They said, Electoral College. They said, again, you're not voting for president and vice president. You're voting for a state of electors chosen by the different presidential campaigns. Once that state is chosen via the election, they almost always vote for the president and vice president with their electoral votes, and some states require them to vote that way by law. See faithless electors. They said, but they are technically free to vote for whomever they want. In a scenario where a vice presidential candidate drops out and the campaign supports that dropout, they will likely issue new instructions for whom their states of electors should vote. Unquote. In essence, it doesn't really matter. It just makes them look far more chaotic than they already are. It makes them look more disorganized. It makes them look far more dishonest. It makes them look desperate. It makes them look terrible. And it just continues to look like the shit show that it really is, which I think is fantastic. So again, whether this is being directed by white hats or not, me personally, I think these people are just flat out stupid. I do believe, again, that the vast majority of all politicians are blackmailed, bought and sold and completely owned in one way or another. With that said, it's individuals like all of us with the shows that we have and the information that we're getting out there, and of course the way that social media exists now, that there's no escaping this. Those of us who, again, were online anonymously many years ago are not online anonymously anymore. Many people still are online anonymously and digging up a great deal of information, but the fact is you can't escape this kind of information. In fact, it's, as you've heard me say before, it's even outlets like the Gateway Pundit, who will run with stories that we bring to their attention. And we simply bring it to their attention by bringing it to the social media platforms that other media outlets are on. So there's no escaping this. This will get worse for Tim Walz, their entire candidacy, and everybody involved. And they're already imploding. I mean, they have these washed up actors and actresses already telling everybody to vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and if you're a man, you'll do it, and blah blah blah. And then of course you have Barack Obama out there lecturing black males to vote for Kamala Harris, even though the turnout doesn't seem very good, but you have a duty to because you're a brother, as he puts it. He has no influence with anybody either. Again, he's a gay man married to a tranny, and he's a pathological liar and a pedophile and a child trafficker. So who's going to take him seriously regarding anything either? This kind of information is free-flowing. It's out there. Most people already know this. Which again, every single time, I mean, it's like a fly trap. It's a giant rainbow-colored fly trap. Every single time that the fly trap shows itself, and one of the flies goes, "Hey, come on over here," that fly who's speaking gets caught in their own trap. While the rest of us are sitting back watching these flies continue to talk and continue to bury themselves politically, professionally, and personally, and every other which way you can possibly imagine, it's not working out for them. The guilt by association is overwhelming, and it's because these people are talking. It's amazing. I mean, again, only the desperate would continue to talk and openly be hypocritical and be as out of touch as these people are. So I find it fascinating, but again, in the long run, this is not going to work out for any of them. It's not working out for them in the short term, let alone the long term. Now let me read this too. This is kind of interesting. This was from Sleepy Dude's Substack on Substack, so it's sleepydude.substack.com. This was on October 11th, and it was titled White Hat Election Night Trap Card. It said, "You've just activated my trap card." And it has a picture of this card game or trap card, and it says, "No internet. There is no internet connection." It says, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" And here's what this article says. Again, it lays out a couple of internet scenarios, and basically, again, the good guys turning off the internet in order to, again, stop the cheating, which is what I mentioned at the top of the show here. But again, just revisiting 2016, I mean, the good guys took it, without a doubt, and the good guys overran the voting fraud from a digital perspective. Of that, I have no doubt. But we also overwhelmed the entire system in 2016 with Donald Trump votes, that the cheating basically wasn't enough. There wasn't enough cheating taking place. So it wouldn't have mattered. Donald Trump was going to win anyway, but they, of course, were not going to let Hillary win. They couldn't do that. So here's what this article says. It's a little lengthy, but not too bad. It is thought-provoking, I think. So here's what it says. It says, quote, "What is the White Hat's big election card to play?" It said, well, aside from doing what they did in 2016 to unrig the rigged election, rather, that was a sure thing for Hillary using Russian interference, quote unquote. It says, what can they do that can disrupt black hat efforts on election night with little to no recourse? They can turn off the internet nationwide, even taking out news, radio, and TV stations if need be. No internet, they said, equals no steal. They cannot logistically coordinate the numbers to know how many ballots to inject. They wouldn't be able to organize and communicate with their operatives and goons in the field to know where or when to drop off ballots. Of course, they can wait until white hats turn the tap back on and then have the media blame the internet outage as the reason for the delay, but that only works short term. What happens if the internet is out for days? This brings in the 10 days of darkness, if you recall. It says, how long can they delay the results without the public getting upset at the already apparent fraud? How long can they delay the results until the ballot watchers spot and investigate all the 4 a.m. moving trucks filled to the brim with wanton flavored paper ballots? It says, election night has the potential to become a game of chicken for an indefinite period of time, all depending on when the black hats relent and spin down the fraud machine. White hats can wait as long as they want, always asserting the use of hand counting and paper ballots if need be. Dominion machines, however, need the numbers flowing in a constant rate from all counties in order to calibrate the fraud from multiple sources. Quote, there is not enough fraud to have altered the outcome of the election, unquote. Surely you've heard that line before. What they don't tell you is the spiel is always in reference to one of several avenues of fraud. Each alone isn't enough, quote unquote, but added all together, you have your steal in the bag. That coordination requires a constant feed of data. If that feed of data is shut down before 4 a.m. drops come in, other avenues of fraud need to pick up the slack. However, they then risk going overboard. What's left is apparent fraud. They'll panic and choose one: mass mail-in ballots, illegal voters, or good old-fashioned miscounting, quote unquote, to pick up the slack for the Dominion Smartmatic cheat machines going offline. They'll still work to swap votes, but they are the key for making sure the numbers don't read more than the population of the county. Then, when or if the internet comes back on, they'd have to scramble to follow through with it. It would also explain why Trump is big on the early voting right now. The earlier the vote, the more of a swell he has on election night right before they would have cut the count and brought in the 4 a.m. ballot boxes. Excuse me. If white hats cut the internet at midnight, early votes and Trump votes will be the only thing people will remember and talk about until the pipes start running again. It would also mean they can't just toss Trump votes into the bin because early votes would have already been counted. The goal is to narrow avenues the black hats have to navigate in. It's definitely a death by 1,000 cuts type of counterplay because black hats have already been doing a death by 1,000 cuts or theft by 1,000 frauds play anyways. It says the no internet on election night card has always been the white hats card to play. Same with black hats, really, just not as much now as it would have been 4 years ago. Now, what are the black hats' contingency plans? Again, it goes on a little bit here, and I'm going to read it because it's interesting. It says contingencies. It says, for one, they can just fake it until they make it. That worked in 2020. But now it's not such a sure thing, especially with so many paranoid patriots standing vigil over the count. Just get the media to lie until people are willing to drag them out into the street and cut their tongues out to stop the lying. How could that possibly go wrong? Another play is to avoid the election altogether. They collapse the financial market and then argue, quote, we don't have enough money to hold the election, unquote. That might not get them as far as they would like, however. It says it's not just the rural states that will struggle to survive. It's the deep blue cities that they hide in like cockroaches under the fridge that will take the biggest hit. Another play is to send the nukes flying, with martial law actives suspend the elections. It says that's the worst for them, though, because while they can try to rule over ashes, they've proven to be too incompetent for even a nuclear holocaust to work, to be quite frank. They really are just that retarded. So what's left? Preeminent internet outage, it says, ? If white hats can turn off the internet, why can't they? Just unplug everything, complain that we can't have an election while the internet is down, and then delay the entire election off as far as possible. Could it work? Can you play the same trap card against itself? Maybe. They said so long as people don't go and touch grass, it could work. The deep state cabal could have to trick people into staying indoors and not communicating with one another for the interim period. If the people liberate themselves from their echo chambers filled with wormtongue.exe bots and start up real discourse, then they might not want to go back to their mainstream fear porn baby bottles. It says it's a risk, but it does buy some time without being too obvious. Then again, patriots will ask, quote, why do we need the internet to hold elections, unquote. Excuses for that are cheap compared to the aforementioned alternatives. It says, no, what I suspect they'll do is going to be even dumber than I or any logical person can theory craft. They will likely settle on the contingency plan, that no one expects, because you can never really anticipate the most deepest levels of idiocy which manifest in the pit of desperation. And then the next section here is about Starlink, and then this wraps it up. It says Starlink. On another note, it may be worth mentioning just how important Starlink is, or was, as a piece on the board. The one who controls it has a lot of potential power in a legacy internet outage scenario. Consider for a moment if Elon hadn't ostensibly switched to the light, quote-unquote, side of the Force. How would our little Star Wars cyberworld election night have looked then? How might an internet famine affect the above game board if Elon was still on Team Satan? Well, if the Black Hats had Starlink, they'd not be worried about an internet outage sabotaging their election steal. They could just flip and switch and keep it going, which tells me that Trump's Space Force collaborating with SpaceX, Starlink, and Elon Musk, turning to the light side, has not only disarmed the Black Hats of a very powerful contingency plan, but have also given the White Hats a keyway to dispel the no internet trap card. The no internet trap card. It said both sides could play the no internet card, quote unquote, mind you. It says it just works best if you also control the alternative, which is almost exclusively Starlink. You could count EBS, but Biden currently has the keys to that, unless devolution, Commander-in-Chief Trump is in play. It's my hunch that the reason Elon went from black to gray and now seemingly to white hat after playing the recusant mediator is because White Hat successfully swooned him and his various handlers into accepting their various proposals. I doubt White Hats have something on Elon and his handlers like blackmail. There has to be a, quote, we share the same enemy, unquote, type of arrangement here. It wraps up, it says that, or Elon was working the longest double-triple agent play with hot fudge and a cherry on top history has ever seen. Even now I doubt his allegiances, but he does seem to be delivering the goods for the present. Mr. SpaceX is kind of pulling a Han Solo here, if you think about it. At first, he didn't want to tussle with the Empire, but eventually he comes in clutch to blow up the Death Star, aka Dominion. It wraps up, it says, the cabal's apprehension and downright sabotage of Starlink being placed in locales like war-torn North Carolina tells me that if the internet goes down and Starlink is in play outside their control, that the voters in North Carolina were left with dubious means of voting now have a way to get their vote to count, thanks to Elon. It'd be harder for them to swap votes and have the dead vote if Elon can get them connected, organized, and back to functioning before election night. If they try to steal the election relying on Starlink servers, then Elon gets the receipts for every packet of data transferred. They can't risk handling Elon, the packet stream, on a silver platter. In other words, the deep state hostility toward the distribution of Starlink units may very well be because it screws up their ultimate plan to disenfranchise Hurricane Helene voters and narrow the gap on North Carolina. Their easing of election regulations post-storm is a clear enough sign of that anyways. Think about it. Internet goes down, the parts they control anyways, and the election results are presented almost entirely through Starlink. That does, indeed, sound like a bad time for the cabal, unquote. I absolutely love this kind of game theory. I love it. I love thinking about this kind of stuff. I love reading this kind of stuff, just sitting around and thinking about it after the fact. This is a level and a dimension of thinking, again, that a lot of people don't participate in. I'm not tooting my own horn. Clearly, if you listen to this show, you like this wavelength of thinking also. But this, again, is so much higher of a dimension than your video game playing, mouth breathing, CNN watching voter. I mean, those individuals, bless their hearts, as off and, not based as they are, they're not capable of thinking this multidimensionally about much. And thinking this way about multiple scenarios is just flat out fun. It's just fun. It's like doing push-ups and sit-ups for the brain. It truly is. It doesn't mean we're lunatics. It means that we know who the enemy is, we know what they're capable of, and the laws of, again, the laws of physics would indicate that if bad guys are capable of doing such things, then good guys are capable of doing such things. And if good guys are capable of doing such things, then why would they want to control such a thing? And what are they thinking about what the bad guys are thinking, and vice versa? And then, of course, how much of what we're actually watching is a show and is completely controlled, one way or another. Again, I like this. I just like this kind of writing, and I like this kind of thinking. It makes sense. The Starlink showing up to North Carolina, East Tennessee was a play. I mean, that was a legit play that got made, and it got in individuals' internet, and it apparently got them the ability to, again, use their cell phones. So again, that being a story and that being in play as certainly as a method for voting for those that are still alive and those that are still there, absolutely. It doesn't diminish their vote. Yes, it, of course, unfortunately knocks down the number of voters because of the departed. But at the exact same time, it doesn't leave people stranded on what to do, which is good. So there's that. That kind of leads me to this here, which again, unfortunately, ties directly into the protocols also, which of course I mentioned and brought up both in Substack and in last Friday's episode. And I just want to mention this again briefly because there are endless stories where, of course, this is the case worldwide. And it fits in, again, with the protocols perfectly, and it's laid out perfectly. And it has to do, of course, with the perversion of the judicial system and the laws in this country, and how it's being used against certainly white Americans, but all individuals and all innocent individuals and victims of serious violent crime. While, again, discretion is being used and innocent individuals are being targeted and thrown in jail, whereas murderers are being let off. You may recall the case of the two illegal, I believe they're illegals anyway, they're certainly Hispanic, male drivers who were driving an automobile in Las Vegas, and they filmed themselves hitting people who were riding bicycles, certainly older men riding bicycles, one of which I believe was a retired police officer, if I'm not mistaken. I could have that wrong. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. He is retired. He was a retired police cop. Anyway, there's been a conclusion to this story, and it was from the Daily Mail, and it was titled, "Appalling Update in Case of Warped Vegas, teen who was filmed laughing while mowing down and killing retired cop on his bike." As it turns out, he's been basically ruled as being incompetent to stand trial. It says a teenager who was caught on camera laughing while fatally running over a retired cop on his bicycle is unfit to stand trial next month. Jesus Aliyah, or Aliyah, whatever the hell, may he burn in hell, has been removed from prison to a maximum security psychiatric facility in Las Vegas to undergo further competency testing. The 19-year-old was arrested in August of 2023 and charged with murder, accused of intentionally striking down Andreas Probst, 64, in a stolen car. It says that they taunted cops at the time of his arrest and allegedly telling them that because he was a juvenile, he'd be out in 30 days. It's just a hit-and-run slap on the wrist, quote-unquote. Now, weeks out from his murder trial, there is doubt over his mental competency. Again, this is the issue here, and this is deliberate. This would not be the standard if the protocols were not in play. But because they are in play, this is being used to demoralize the public who pay attention to these kinds of trials and these kinds of cases, even though these kinds of cases exist everywhere. Just like the overweight black woman who stabbed to death, or certainly stabbed and wounded, if not to death, the mother and a 9-year-old boy in a grocery store as this woman was walking around with a knife in her hands looking for someone to stab. And then she was laughing in court, of course, and then she was deemed as being incompetent to stand trial due to psychiatric reasons. Again, this is called murder. And there should be a death penalty associated with this. This has to be the future of our nation. This is where our nation has to go in the future. We cannot have separate laws for separate people based on separate judges or separate prosecutors or defendants or counselors and psychiatrists and what have you, who all have this excuse-making mentality, either through their own brainwashing that they've experienced through this, again, completely brainwashed, corrupt system that we live in, or through financial kickbacks of some kind and bribery. This can't exist anymore in our country. If you kill someone, you will be killed. Now, me personally, I think it would be rather interesting to do it in the form and fashion in which the person actually does the killing. If this particular individual ran over an individual on a bicycle with an automobile, then go buy a beat-up automobile, put the person on a bicycle, who again was the one who initially committed the murder, and run over them with an automobile. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, as it were. This would be an interesting world to live in. Tar and feathering, as you've heard me say, that too would be an interesting world to live in yet again. But this again is all a part of the protocols of the Elders of Zion. This is all part of it. It's demoralization. It's designed to turn everybody against the system. It's designed to have zero faith in the system. It's designed to put these criminals back on the streets so that they can hurt and kill more people. This is the issue, but this has been scripted for well over 120 some odd years. Which now leads me to this. A slight transition here. In recent days and in recent speeches, certainly the one in Colorado with Donald Trump, he mentioned the Foreign Enemies Act of 1798. This is one specific act specifically having to do with the Alien and Sedition Acts, plural, of 1798. And I want to read some of these descriptions here regarding this, certainly from a historic standpoint and where and when it originated. And this is from AmericanHistoryCentral.com. It's titled, The Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798, Four Laws That Led to the Downfall of the Federalist Party. It says, the Alien and Sedition Acts were four laws passed by the Federalist-controlled Congress and signed by President John Adams, intended to reduce foreign influence in the United States and public criticism of government. However, the laws were controversial and contributed to the rise of the Democratic Republican Party to power in 1800. That, of course, ushered in Thomas Jefferson. So this was clearly a massive disagreement between Adams and Jefferson. It says, Alien and Sedition Acts Summary. The Alien and Sedition Acts were four laws passed by the United States Congress in 1798 during the presidency of John Adams. At the time, the Federalist Party controlled Congress, and Adams was a member of that party. Following the events of the Citizen Guinée affair, if I'm saying that right, and the XYZ affair, and the opening of the quasi-war with France, there was a significant anti-French sentiment in the United States. It goes on, it says, the Federalist Party, who supported close ties with Great Britain over France, pushed the laws through, arguing they would control the activities of foreigners in the United States. The acts were met with opposition and criticism from Thomas Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans, who argued they were unconstitutional and violated freedom of speech and freedom of the press. The acts were repealed or expired by 1802 and contributed to Jefferson winning the presidential election of 1800, which ushered in the Jeffersonian era. It goes on, it says Alien and Sedition Acts dates. It says number 1, June 18th of 1798, the Naturalization Act extended the residency period from 5 to 14 years for aliens seeking citizenship. The law was aimed at Irish and French immigrants who were often active in Republican politics, it says. Number 2, which was June 25th of 1798, the Alien Act, as it was called, allowed the expulsion of aliens deemed dangerous during peacetime. Number 3, July 6th of that same year, 1798, the Alien Enemies Act allowed the expulsion or imprisonment of aliens deemed dangerous during wartime. This was never enforced, but it did prompt numerous Frenchmen to return to France. That sounds very similar to another theory that was brought up, which of course was if the law were to actually be enacted here and certainly followed up on, that these individuals again would sort of self-deport. Although I find that hard to believe at this stage of the game. Again, people would basically be given the choice, do you want to go to jail here in the United States or do you want freedom in your home country? I think time will tell on that, but I think people are going to dig in here in the United States. And then finally, it says number 4, on July 16th of 1789, It says the Sedition Act provided for fines or imprisonment for individuals who criticize the government, Congress, or president in speech or print. Again, I can clearly see how Jefferson and Adams would disagree on that one. I mean, Adams didn't want individuals to criticize the government. Jefferson was like, wait a minute, that is a violation of the freedom of speech, and there you go. There's a few more facts associated with this also, 10 of them as a matter of fact. It says the Alien and Sedition Acts facts. It says the Alien and Sedition Acts were a set of 4 laws passed by the United States Congress in 1798 during the presidency of John Adams. The 4 laws were the Naturalization Act, the Alien Friends Act, the Alien Enemies Act, and the Sedition Act. The Sedition Act was the most controversial and made it a crime to publish false, scandalous, and malicious writing about the federal government, Congress, or the president, and was used to silence political opposition. Well, again, if you think about the way that it is today, lying in the media is allowed. And herein lies the problem. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here in the future. It goes on, it says number 4, the Alien and Sedition Acts were criticized as unconstitutional and a violation of freedom of speech in the press and played a role in the election of Thomas Jefferson as president in 1800. Number 5, Democratic Republicans responded to the acts by writing the Virginia and Kentucky Resolves, which contributed to the nullification crisis, a direct cause of the Civil War. Number 6, Federalists claimed that the laws were enacted to control the activities of foreigners in the United States during a time of impending war with France. Number 7, the only journalists prosecuted under the Sedition Act were editors of Democratic Republican newspapers. Number 8, the constitutionality of the Sedition Act was never determined by the Supreme Court because it expired in 1801, and the doctrine of judicial review was not established in the Marbury v. Madison decision in 1803. Number 9, it says one of the people indicted for stirring up sedition was Democratic Republican Congressman Matthew Lyon, a harsh critic of President Adams. Lyon successfully conducted his re-election campaign from jail in 1800. And number 10, after becoming president, Thomas Jefferson pardoned all of those that were convicted of crimes under the Sedition Act. So this is going to be interesting. Again, we've heard Donald Trump specifically on Truth openly say that, and certainly say in the Colorado rally, that he wants to get rid of the illegal gangs, quote unquote, that exist within the United States. They're all illegal. It's not just gangs. I mean, they're all illegal. Every single one of them. Men, women, children. It doesn't matter. In my opinion, these people, all of them, whether they are criminally associated or not, in a gang or not, they all need to go. Because simply by crossing the border, they broke the law. And that's the way that it has to be. And then the laws have to get stricter, as if to say, if you come into this country by walking across or being flown in, and you aid and abet in that, all of those people and or organizations and money funders, which we know is the Jewish lobby, you're all going to jail. That has to happen. You will all be felons, and that's the way that it is, and the illegals are going back home where they originally came from. This has to be the way forward here. And again, it can't be selective, and there can't be discretion, and it can't be, well, are you separating kids from their parents? I mean, Donald Trump's openly stated, we don't know if these are their parents or not. A lot of these children don't even have parents. Endless children have already been trafficked and are dead. He's openly stated that too. They all have to go. All of them. There can't be anchor babies here. They can't stay. They just can't. So I don't know what else to say about it other than we have to see this, and it can't be selective. Like, oh, if you've been here illegally a little bit longer than these people over here who have been here illegally, well, then you're allowed to stay a little longer than the people who have been here for a shorter amount of time. That can't happen either. There can't be any of this gameplay. It has to be direct, it has to be blunt, and there has to be a state-by-state, town-by-town, city-by-city roundup of these people, 100%. And hell, all you'd have to do is go to every single city council and talk with the mayors and the city councils and say, where do they live? Because you're the ones putting them up. You're the one buying property. You're the one putting up the homes and the affordable housing, quote unquote. Where do they live? And oh, by the way, if you impede our investigation, we're arresting you also. That has to happen too. And I would love to see that also. But this is the way forward, in my humble opinion. Okay. One quick thing about Hurricane Milton, certainly Hurricane Milton. Of course, as you might expect, it was found out through leaked emails that basically government offices were telling government agencies to stand down when it came to helping and even traveling to these areas, which is why you aren't seeing National Guard there and a number of other things. There's two particular emails here. These date back a little bit. But this first one was from a Cheryl Parquette on Tuesday, October 1st of 2024. And it was titled Hurricane Helene Disaster Relief Update. It says, as many of you have seen over the past few days and read in Tunde's posts, which I'll read one of this person's posts in just a second, whoever this Tunde person is, it says Hurricane Helene has caused devastating damage. Thousands of homes have been destroyed. Vast areas are flooded. There have been widespread power outages and tragically loss of life. The full impact of the flooding, especially in western North Carolina, is still unfolding. People are in urgent need of medical and hygiene kits, food, water, temporary shelters as they navigate this challenging time. They said, we are coordinating all disaster response efforts through the governor's office, and they have asked us to spread the following message. And then it says, please do not travel to western North Carolina. To deliver donations, volunteer spontaneously, bring home-cooked meals, or view the devastation, it says. The roads are impassable, and rescue and recovery operations are ongoing. The urge to help is wonderful. It's who, blah, 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 and then it gets cut off. And then there's this other one from this Tunde person. It says, Western North Carolina was the subject line. It says, team, like you, I'm deeply troubled after the disaster in Western North Carolina following Hurricane Helene. It's distressing to see the scenes of devastation in our communities here at home. It's catastrophic. Some of you are living it or have yet to hear from loved ones in the area. The urgent needs of these communities ignite a desire to help in all of us. I want to assure you that we are actively engaging on several fronts. The ELT and leaders across our organization have been meeting all weekend. It says we are following the governor's office's coordination in a statewide response. Blue Cross North Carolina is working with state, federal, local officials and our community partners across western North Carolina counties to assess the needs of our communities and determine how we can best support them. It says we, like them, want to make sure we get this right. We will update all of you in the best ways to mobilize our team. There are some measures that we have already taken. For now, we recommend this guidance from the NCDHHS, including where to send monetary donations. I wouldn't do that if I was anybody. It says for employees who have been impacted, your safe and well-being are our top priority. Please take care of yourself and check the zone for available resources. North Carolina stands united. We will heal together. Stay safe and more to come soon. Tunde. A Tunde Satunde is their name. Basically, again, Roy Cooper said stand down, and government did, and that's that. So Roy Cooper should hang by the neck until dead. If anybody disagrees with me on that, well, you're not paying attention to what's actually happening. On to a couple of education-related things, and then a couple of jab-related stories, including a cure for something, ladies and gentlemen, that even Dr. Artis has brought up, and I've used it myself, and it works splendidly. In fact, the speed in which nicotine gum works is astounding. First of all, there was this with one little piece of audio here to play. This is from Just the News, and you know my take on this and groups like this. You know that I don't like them. Because again, all they do is kick the can down the road and they still advocate for government schooling, of which, of course, I do not, under any circumstance whatsoever. But this was from Just the News, and it was titled, Moms for Liberty Defeats School District That Birthed It. Speaking rules deemed unconstitutional. So it says, quote, "It would be difficult, if not possible, for speakers to adequately air their concerns about a particular book without informing both the board and the community about what the book says," 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals says. So it says the Florida school district that birthed Moms for Liberty as a repudiation of its COVID-19 mandates on their children is parenting the conservative group all wrong, so to speak, according to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. In its Tuesday ruling, smackdown Brevard Public Schools and 4 current and former school board members for unconstitutional restrictions on public comments at their meetings in a lawsuit by Moms for Liberty founding Brevard County chapter and its members, putting public schools on notice across the court's jurisdiction of the Sunshine State, Alabama, and Georgia. Okay, first of all, again, it's the First Amendment to the Constitution. I'm glad they unfortunately had to it's unfortunate they had to go to court for the First Amendment to the Constitution. I'm glad they won. Good for them. Again, it specifically had to do with reading passages out of these perverse books that exist in these environments. That, however, doesn't get rid of the perverse books. And it doesn't really hold the district accountable, does it? The only thing that would really hold the district accountable is you walking away and you making them bankrupt. So again, I'm not saying that groups like Moms for Liberty, can't do good work. I know that they can. However, the issue here is that they're kicking the can down the road of government-funded schools. And at the end of the day, the problem is the brainwashing that exists in these environments. The brainwashing is not just in the employees, it's also in the curriculum. And that's a two-pronged fork that is very difficult to get rid of because it's the law. It's state law that the curriculum is the way that it is, that if you question it as a student or as a parent, or even as a teacher, you will be removed or disciplined within these environments, and that's it. Now that should sound familiar because that's also in the protocols of the Elders of Zion, that the entire idea is to brainwash the environment and the people within so much so that if there's dissent against the information that's being taught, then you will be rooted out. You will be found, rooted out, and done away with, and we will only hire the compliant slaves. That's the entire business. But Moms for Liberty isn't going after that. They're going after low-hanging fruit. Perverse books in schools, being able to read them in board meetings to bring them to the public's attention, and then the First Amendment. All low-hanging fruit. Moms for Liberty will never go for the root of the problem, which you've heard me, of course, bring up on the show with regularity, and you know what it is. They'll never go for the root. You'll never hear them say, well, in the protocols of the Elders of Zion, it specifically talked about brainwashing, distraction, and control. And if we can brainwash and distract and control the people within these environments, those that work within and work for the business, along with those who attend the business, and attend these schools to do the so-called learning, that once we control all of these people, then we'll continue to be able to manipulate everybody and do anything that we want to do. You'll never hear Moms for Liberty say that. They just grift, they take donations, they travel around the country, they file lawsuits, and then they grift a little bit more. All for what? The First Amendment? Again, I'm not saying it's not important what they've done. However, it's still low-hanging fruit. So very quickly, here's a piece of audio. This is John Solomon talking to Tiffany Justice, one of the founders of Moms for Liberty. Listen to her in 3, 2, 1.
I would say 3 years ago, if I was in a similar crowd, I would hear, I'm really depressed. I don't know what I can do. I'm giving up. It's not worth fighting anymore. Every person that attended your event was energized. They felt like they could make a difference. That transformation of scoring wins, whether it's in the courts where you've won with Title IX and other things, or in the school boards, or now at the federal level where you guys are regularly testifying before Congress. How did that transformation occur? Because it was palpably different from any conversation I had in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, you have a choice to make right now in America. You can be angry if you want to. You can lose sleep and not sleep at night, or you can get involved and get active. People ask me, how do you sleep? I'm like, well, I'm really tired, right? We're working so hard all the time. But I really think that's what moms and dads wanted. They see all these different issues, and you've got your kids watching you saying, what are you going to do about it? What kind of a role model are you going to be? So we say we're joyful warriors. We're going to fight with a smile on our faces because our kids are watching us, and we want them to understand that, number one, it's a privilege to fight for America. And being involved in politics, getting involved in running for office or helping people run for office should be fun. This should be a celebration of what's best about America, our representative government. So I'm so happy to hear that people seem energized and excited. I think they really feel in this moment that we're taking our country back.
Again, she sounds like Simone Gold to me. You know my stance on this. I'm just not a fan of these kinds of individuals, whether they've been in education or not. I'm assuming she's never been in the business. It doesn't necessarily matter. Excuse me. If you're grifting, you're grifting. And if you're still perpetuating the government indoctrination system that is America, then as far as I'm concerned, that's part of the problem. And that is a big chunk of the problem. There has to be an abolition of the entire system. Only then will people wake up. Because leaving the business and leaving as a student and as a family from this indoctrination business called American education, that is literally the only way to rip the cord out of the back of the neck in the matrix of this entire matrix. It's the only way. Yes, there are awake people who still work in the business. Of this, I have no doubt. And I'll mention a brief story very quickly from a former guest on the show who listens to the show. They sent me something which is, very typical and horrific at the exact same time as to how the business is not really improving where it needs to really improve. But again, groups like this and grifting organizations like this, I'm sorry, they just grab for low-hanging fruit, and it will always bother me because it's not solving the real problem. In fact, let me give you another example here. This would be like individuals, again, still advocating to send their children to brick-and-mortar universities. This continues to be an issue. This was from the UK and the Daily Mail specifically, and it was titled, Woke Row Erupts After Nottingham University Puts Trigger Warning on Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales because they contain, quote, expressions of Christian faith, unquote. Now again, I mean, this is the protocols of the Elders of Zion all over again. We will remove Christianity and God from thought, from the mainstream, from the written word, from literature, whatever it may be. And this right here, as you might expect, is why you'll never find a copy of the McGuffey Readers inside of elementary schools, middle schools, and or high schools within American K-12 schools. Because you will find the name God and Christian lessons and God lessons and polite lessons within those books as children are using those books to learn how to read in a, again, chronological, progressive manner. And progressing again from basic phonics all the way through comprehension, spelling, and writing on your own. If God exists or Christianity exists within religion, the moneylenders and the Zionists want it gone. This is a part of the plan. And they're still doing it to this day. It's 2024, the latter half, and it's still going on. This is a huge issue. Again, Nottingham University, it says, has now been accused of demeaning education for warning students about the religious elements of Chaucer's stories, saying that anyone studying one of the most famous works in English literature would hardly have to have the Christian references pointed out. So again, universities can keep doing this, I suppose. Moms for Liberty can keep saying that they have the right to bring this to the forefront of school boards, certainly in America and other places, and they have freedom of speech and the ability to do all of that, and there's nothing that can stop them, and that's all fine and dandy. But it doesn't stop the enemy from doing what the enemy is doing, which is brainwashing people. There's nothing that's stopping that. And let me give you a very specific example of where this brainwashing kicks into gear. I mentioned this a very long time ago when I taught school, and certainly on this show, and I even wrote about strategies like this. But there are endless demoralization strategies that take place regarding school teachers, toward school teachers, because again, they themselves are the ones who are in a position at the very least to be independent, and independent in thought and management skills and you name it, and certainly instruction and organization and you name it. But when they start to be mismanaged within the profession and micromanaged specifically by administrators, both in the building and then, of course, at the district office and then even from the state, this is where the bureaucracy shows its hand. And the long arm of government stretches from the Department of Education and all the NGOs right into the lap of a school teacher and ultimately has a negative impact on students under the false premise of being positive for students. So let me mention again what happened very quickly and remind everybody very quickly with what happened with me when I was a school teacher regarding these kinds of quote-unquote non-negotiable strategies. When I was a middle school teacher, there was a book that was introduced to the entire staff. Everybody was told to read it to their students during homeroom, which was in the middle of the day, which was also stupid. And at the exact same time, we were asked to implement these particular strategies in our classrooms and certainly throw all of the jargon and the propaganda and evil propaganda up on the actual dry erase board, which of course just took up space on our dry erase board that no one could even read, let alone see. It specifically had to do with a book by Sean Covey, the son of Stephen Covey, all Mormons, and it had to do with the, whatever it was, 10 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, I believe the book was called. It's a complete waste of time and just, again, it's just pure propaganda. With that said, there were certain strategies that they wanted everybody to put on the dry erase board, like what's your goal, what's your mission statement, what's the thing you're doing that day, whatever else, even though the students already knew what we were doing because it was on a separate calendar that we would always have in our classrooms. So it was not just redundancy per se, it was irrelevant redundancy. It wasn't even redundant based on the common sense thing we were doing at the time. It was just stupid and retarded. But again, we would get yelled at if we didn't have it on our board, and I never did, and they hated me for it. Long story short, a friend of the show from Houston, Texas, sent me the following, and here's exactly what they said, and they even sent me a screenshot. I put this up on Gab last week, three or 4 days ago, as a matter of fact. They said, quote, every teacher in Houston Independent School District is now required to post their objectives and other learning expectations on the board, just like this. And they took a picture of it. They said, we are not allowed to write on the board with markers. Everything has to be printed with the largest font that can fit on one page, but in sheet protectors and taped to the board. The current date is also supposed to be printed and sheet protected, but I haven't had time to go upstairs and use the printer. They call this a non-negotiable, quote unquote, one of many. My walls are littered with non-negotiables, quote unquote, and no one ever reads, not that you can see it unless you're standing right in front of it. It says, this is something a crazy person does. I work for crazy people, unquote. And again, they have the date at the top. They have the text and a description of the text, apparently, that they're reading that day. They have something else that's abbreviated. They have something else that's abbreviated. They have a guided question. Again, this is all at least 12 to 15 years old. All of this jargon nonsense. There's an agenda where they basically, again, are typing out what the students are supposed to do, even though the students can't see this from their own desk, and they never walk up to the board to look at it, because it's the job of the teacher to vocalize what is going to happen that particular day. It's not really the responsibility of students to look at a board and read about what they're doing that day. I mean, you can just tell students. It's a whole lot faster than all this other nonsense demoralization. And then there's a do now activity, and then potentially a homework activity also. This is 7 pieces of paper that these teachers are asked to print out every single day for every single lesson for 180 days. It's completely ridiculous. So again, this is a control method. It's a demoralization method. It's not an organizational tool, which you would think, and a layperson would think that it is, but it's not. It's just designed to demoralize and control the teacher because they believe, the business does, that communism is their way to actually academically succeed. They quite literally believe that. That if everybody's doing the same thing, and they use the term best practices, quote unquote, and then they force it by calling it a non-negotiable, i.e., you don't have a choice, and if you don't do it, we'll use that against you when it comes to the evaluation process. At the end of the year, well, then you're non-compliant, which means then you're deemed insubordinate, which means then you're fired. This is how they get rid of people who aren't communists. This is how they break people. This is how they force communism on the business. Moms for Liberty won't ever bring this up. Nor will Moms for Liberty even go one slight branch over in that Jewish lobby satanic tree and grab the branch that has the answer as to why perverse books are in the libraries in the first place. She's not even going to go that far. This is why I have a problem with all of this. You can't fix this. You can't communize your way out of it. You can't grift your way out of this. You can't, we're taking back our rights and we're taking back our schools. All of that's horseshit. It'll never happen. It won't. You have to abolish this system. Period. And thank God the system's killing itself. It is death by 1,000 cuts, but they're self-inflicted, and I'm fine with it. Let it happen. Okay. That kind of shit really gives me PTSD. Big time. Throws me right in a time machine, right back into those old days, and it just drives me up the wall. But I feel for her, and she's at the end of her career, and she's trying to rough it out here. So pray for her anyway, because again, it's just beyond terrible. Okay, some good news. Here we go. First of all, there's been a long study now that is now on Mackes's Substack page, Dr. Mackes's Substack page, having to do again with cancer treatment with fenbendazole and ivermectin. Again, I recommend you check that out on his Substack page. It was from October 13th. Titled Breaking News, First in the World Ivermectin, Mebendazole and Fenbendazole Protocol in Cancer has been peer-reviewed and published on September 19th of 2024. The future of cancer treatment starts now. It was in the Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine. It was titled Targeting the Mitochondrial Stem Cell Connection in Cancer Treatment, a Hybrid Orthomolecular Protocol. And Mackes is one of the many authors associated with it. So there you have it. I will also take this particular study and upload it on my website as well in that larger document having to do with the jabs and the mask wearing and all of that. Okay. Let me move on to this and conclude with this. Last week, Dr. Brian Ardis was on Stu Peters, and Dr. Ardis has a new book out that I believe is available in December, if I'm not mistaken. It has to do with the lies of COVID and treatments and a number of research, of course, and storytelling and things that he brought up regarding the Watch the Water documentary and a number of other things. Repeatedly, over the last year plus, he's brought up the business of nicotine. In fact, I wrote an article about it on Substack back in May of 2023, posting a 4chan post that I believe was back in 2020 having to do again with the use of nicotine. Regarding my own illness, certainly this past time that I was ill, which was the first time in 11 some odd years, along with that 100-day cough that I had back in 2021, even knowing everything that I knew about nicotine, being a dumbass, I still did not try Nicorette and nicotine gum. I smoke cigars from time to time, but I've never tried Nicorette gum. This past time when I was ill, I was coughing so frequently and so hard that I was having to edit these episodes to basically cut out all of my coughing. As I'm spitting into a trash can that's to my right side here. I mean, it was violent and it was awful. Same thing, of course, with when I was sleeping. I would wake up in the middle of the night. I would start coughing profusely so hard that I would eventually just sort of black out. Ladies and gentlemen, the other day, after watching Stu Peters and Dr. Artis on Stu Peters' show, I acquired Nicorette Gum, 2 milligram Nicorette Gum. They sell it, of course, online, and you can buy it at Walmart for very cheap. 20 pieces is about $12 of 2 milligram Nicorette Gum. I chewed one piece, and as God is my witness, after chewing the one piece, my coughing stopped. I'm not kidding, and I'm not exaggerating. The coughing stopped. The only thing I do now is occasionally clear my throat, but it's gone. Now, I made the mistake of overdosing on this gum. So let me read the directions here. Basically, what they want you to do is you chew one piece. Well, I'll just read the back of the container here. It says, chew the gum slowly until it tingles. It says, then park it between your cheek and gum. When the tingle is gone, begin chewing again until the tingle returns. I didn't get any kind of a tingle sensation whatsoever. It says, repeat this process until most of the tingle is gone, about 30 minutes. So basically, you chew one 2 milligram piece of Nicorette gum for 30 minutes, and then you spit it out. It says, do not eat or drink for 15 minutes before chewing the Nicorette gum, or while chewing a piece. It says, do not use more than 24 pieces a day. Me personally, I would not recommend using 4 milligrams. I would only recommend using 2, based on my experience, because after using the 2 milligram, about an hour later, I started chewing on 2 pieces at the same time, which is 4 milligrams. I then started exercising, and then I got really dizzy, very fatigued, took a nap, and I was still tired and still a little lightheaded after all of that. But with all of that said, again, my recommendation is the following, that you acquire, whether you have been shed on, whether you are ill, whether you have a nagging cough or you don't, and whether you are jabbed or you're not, that you acquire Nicorette gum, that you have plenty on hand, and that you chew one singular 2 milligram piece, in particular when you start to feel ill. I would go so far as to say that this is more effective than ivermectin. I'm not kidding. I took the ivermectin when I was ill, and I'll be frank with you, I don't think it did shit. I took hydroxychloroquine, both the pill form and drinking it. You know, from the juice associated from the rinds of grapefruits and lemons and the whole thing. Didn't do anything with a cough. You heard me talk about the cough suppressant medicine that I took, Mucinex and Delsum. I drank at least 2 bottles of that. Nothing. It was Nicorette gum. Why? Why Nicorette? Because it's the nicotine that inhibits the synthetic snake venom that is in these biological shots that is shedding on people. It's that simple. Honest to Christ, it worked. I'm not joking. This is not an exaggeration. It flat out worked. Dr. Artis was right. The unfortunately departed individual who was murdered, who was bringing this information to people's attention from a university in Pennsylvania, an Asian man. He was the one who researched this and ended up finding this out to be the case. He was immediately killed as a result. But I'm telling you, this is it. So Nicorette Gum. Again, you can acquire it online. You can get it cheaper at Walmart. I don't think it matters the kind of nicotine gum you use, but 1 2 milligram piece in one day is all that it took to stop the persistent coughing. And so I'm going to keep using this 1 piece a day for at least the next week. And I'll come back and tell you what's happened. But ladies and gentlemen, after chewing now 4 pieces, albeit 3 pieces in one day, which was a mistake, my cough is gone. I've recorded this entire episode without having to cough and or spit into a trash can. I'm not kidding. So success. And again, if nicotine specifically also inhibits and disrupts and or destroys any of the nanotech that is involved in the actual jabbed and in the jabs, along with any shedding that takes place between the jabbed and the non-jabbed, then nicotine is the answer. But it's really straight nicotine. It's the gum. And it could be dipping too, that might help, but I've heard people say smoking cigarettes works. Me, like I said, I smoke cigars from time to time. That didn't do anything. But it was really the Nicorette Gum. I've even heard people say, even on the Chan boards, Nicorette, nicotine lozenges work the exact same. I'm going to recommend the gum because I've taken the gum and it flat out worked after 1 piece. So there you have it. Success, ladies and gentlemen. Nicorette Gum. Who knew? Lots of people did, as it turns out. In fact, just to remind everybody, and I'm kicking myself for not even taking my own advice and applying my own information that I learn, I will include the past article from over a year ago. It was last May of 2023 that included this in it. And all of this information, including that giant 4chan post describing how nicotine is the answer here. So with all of that said, thank you for listening. Make sure and acquire that gum. Definitely have it on hand for your family. I can't imagine even an elementary school age student, middle school student, or even a high school age student having a problem with this. Again, one 2 milligram piece isn't going to kill anybody. Just take it as directed and only take 1 piece a day and chew it for 30 minutes and then spit it out. That's it. So with all that said, again, if anybody has any comments or questions, please let me know. And I'll catch you on Wednesday. Thanks for listening. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.